Who your top five?
My top five is LJ number one, MJ number two, Kobe number three, Steph number four, and Shaq number five.
Draymond Green over the past couple of years has been a very outspoken voice in the NBA media, giving his takes on current players as well as past legends. And when it comes to LeBron James, it is definitely not a secret he is a big fan. And in the past, he's gone as far as saying LeBron has a quote-unquote flawless resume, which is simply laughable. And most recently, he gave his top 5 players of all time, where he had LeBron first over Jordan, who was second. So in the next couple of minutes, we're going to listen to Draymond make his case for LeBron James being the GOAT, and hopefully it's a good argument and not utter nonsense.
Okay.
You got Bron first.
Yes, because what Bron has done, like when you talk about Cicely Tyson,
Yeah.
Bron started in 03. By 2005, Bron was the best player in the NBA.
Yeah.
In 2020, he was still the best player in the NBA. He was the best player in the NBA no matter what the game did.
So stopping Draymond right there, his first point, looks at longevity and LeBron's sustained greatness. I have to admit, LeBron in this category is simply phenomenal, and for me personally, he has the best longevity of all time. Now, where Draymond is objectively wrong is saying LeBron from 05 to 2020 was the best player in the world every single year. Objectively speaking, this is simply not true, as during this time period, Kobe Bean Bryant did exist. And looking at 2005 in particular, I would say Tim Duncan at that point was the better overall player and more impactful to his team. After the Spurs, he averaged 20, 11, and 3 on 50% shooting with 3 blocks, en route to San Antonio, winning 59 games. That year, Duncan was 4th in MVP voting and 4th in DPOY, both ahead of LeBron James. And to cap it off, he won the Finals MVP versus the Pistons, beating them in 7. Now, the big elephant in the room is indeed Kobe, who in 05 you could also argue was the best player in the world. And looking at 06, I would say Kobe at that point, despite the team's success, was the best overall player, averaging 35.4 points per game, having 27 games of 40 plus points, 6 games of 50 plus points, and 2 games cracking 60. And looking past 2006, Kobe from 08 to 2010, I once again would say was the best overall player. Now stats-wise, he definitely took a step back, but team-wise and accolades-wise, he was dominant during this time period, winning 1 MVP, making 3 straight finals, and winning 2 finals MVPs. Kobe versus LeBron in the 2010s 100% was a real debate, but from 03 to 09, Kobe versus LeBron in my opinion was definitely not close, as Kobe at that point was a better overall player, he was more experienced, and won 2 championships back-to-back in the very tough Western Conference.
When you look at the teams that Bron has carried to championship or carried to the finals, MJ didn't beat the greatest team ever assembled, nor did he run up against the greatest team ever assembled every year.
So stopping that clip right there, one thing I found very interesting is Draymond mid-sentence caught himself and corrected, as initially he said LeBron James carried his team to championships, but switched it to carry them to finals. As if he said championships, that fact would indeed be wrong. As in 2012, he had Dwayne Wade averaging 23 points per game. In 2013, once again Wade averaged 20 points. Kyrie in 2016 averaged 27, and AD in 2020 averaged 25 a game. Now look, LeBron for his career, yes, he has carried teams to the NBA Finals, but not once has he carried a team to a championship. Compared to Jordan, who in '98 100% carried that Bulls team across the finish line. As when it came to playoffs, he averaged 32 points, 5 boards, 4 assists, 2 steals on 46% shooting. Those stats on their own are highly impressive. By adding some context, Scottie Pippen, he missed nearly 40 games that season, and in the playoffs only averaged 17 points and was injured in the NBA Finals. And looking at Dennis Rodman, he was in his mid to late 30s and was benched in the Eastern Conference Finals, and MJ's second best scorer was Tony Kukoc, who only averaged 13 points per game. Looking at that Bulls team, they were the oldest team in NBA history to win a championship, and stats-wise for supporting cast, they had the lowest points average ever for a championship team. And for the cherry on top, in Game 6 versus the Jazz, Michael Jordan scored 45 of his team's 87 points, which is more than half. In NBA Finals history, no other player has scored over half his team's points in a game. And Michael Jordan did it in Game 6 at age 35, trying to win his 6th championship. Now, one more thing I do want to address is Draymond saying Michael Jordan in the NBA Finals never beat the greatest team ever assembled and never faced them every single year. Now, taking 2 steps back, this statement, on its face value, makes no sense, because LeBron James in 2016 did not beat the greatest team of all time. And historically, it's not even the best Warriors team of that decade. And when it comes to 2016, that Warriors team, they were great. They won 73 games, but in the playoffs, they were a shell of themselves and almost were beat by the Oklahoma City Thunder. And after adding Kevin Durant, undoubtedly that team was better than in 2016. And looking at Michael Jordan, how can you blame him for not playing the greatest team of his era when the Bulls were the best team because of MJ?
You look at the skill set that Bron has. There's nobody that has ever played the game of basketball that can do what LeBron James does on a basketball court. Nobody. Michael Jordan could do just about all that LeBron James does, except for he for damn sure couldn't pass like Bron.
They had a vision like that.
Now, stopping this clip right there, it's going to get pretty confusing, but let me explain myself. When debating skill and overall talent, of course you look at things like scoring, defense, efficiency, playmaking, all those aspects. But the one thing you have to do when grading those categories, some things like scoring are vastly more important than rebounding. Simply looking at 2 players and comparing a checklist of which player is better at which aspect is a flawed way of debating players. As to most NBA fans, including myself, scoring and defense are the 2 most important traits for a basketball player. Yes, I'll admit LeBron James, he is the better passer, but comparing him to Jordan when it comes to scoring, that gap in scoring is much wider than the gap in playmaking. As for Jordan, nearly 10-time scoring champ, the all-time leader in points per game in the playoffs and regular season, and had 7 straight years averaging 30-plus points. And even looking at defense, that gap compared to LeBron James once again is wider than the passing and playmaking gap. As Jordan in his career was a 9-time All-Defensive Player, a 1-time DPOY, led the NBA in steals multiple seasons, and after turning 30, didn't give up and stop playing defense like LeBron James. And if you really want to get into the weeds of it, looking at Jordan's skill in the post, the mid-range, his free throw shooting, his clutch play, his NBA Finals play, and his playoff play in general, compared to LeBron James, he clears them in all aspects.
I love MJ. I think MJ is incredible. Like, MJ is MJ. Like, we all wanted to be like Mike. Like, I wear 23. Come on now. Like, we all want to be like Mike. But what LeBron has been able to do and how he can control a game and, like, to do it this long, like, MJ retired. Like, this shit's grueling. Like, going to the finals year after year after year. Bron went 8 or 9 straight years.
9 straight.
Like, MJ took a break right in the heat of that shit.
So stopping him right there, Draymond Green, once again, brings up longevity and making the NBA Finals, which is a very, very basic LeBron fan argument I've seen 1,000 times. Now, the one flaw with this argument, compared to Jordan, he wasn't just making the finals, he was winning those series every time he went. Compared to LeBron James, who when he made the finals, was winning those series less than 50% of the time. And if you want to talk overall competition, Jordan compared to LeBron beat more 50-win teams, more 55-win teams, and even more 60-win teams. And Jordan's East in the 90s, compared to LeBron James in the 2010s, is not even comparable. And one thing Draymond won't do is compare Jordan and LeBron and their actual finals resumes. as Jordan's 7 seasons won 6 titles and three-peated twice, compared to LeBron James, who won 4 titles in 10 years, hopping teams, only going back-to-back 1 time with 0 three-peats. Why are we ignoring the elephant in the room, which is winning the finals and not just making it? And one thing for Draymond that was highly disingenuous when talking about Jordan's retirement was ignoring his father dying in 1994. I think that happening had a massive impact on Jordan, calling it quits and hanging it up for a year and a half. Ignoring that one fact and just saying Jordan quit and took a break is very, very disingenuous, and quite frankly, if you reach that hard to critique Jordan, LeBron James in no way is the greater overall player.
So, for me, that's why it's Bron over MJ for me. And on top of that, the talent nowadays is way better. And I'm sure one of the old f***s gonna say, you out of your mind, and this, that, and the other, blah, blah, blah. The talent is way better. Just like the talent at Apple is way better than the talent that was working at Apple in 1991.
Now, stopping that clip right there, the overall era's argument comparing talent and skill is always fun and interesting. And the way I look at it, when talking about great players, for the most part, they'd be great in any era. But for some evidence, look at the 1990s and some players from that decade who were great in the 2000s and even the 2010s. People like Kobe, Allen Iverson, Kevin Garnett, Chris Webber, Shaq, Vince Carter, Jason Kidd, Dirk, Ray Allen, even Paul Pierce. Those guys all played in the 90s, the 2000s, and even the 2010s. My point being, if the NBA over a 20-year period got so much better, why weren't those players toast in the 21st century and the 2010s? And looking at LeBron James, his own career disproves Draymond's theory. As back in 2003, LeBron James, he was drafted at age 18 and 20 years later is still dominating at nearly 38. If eras get drastically better over a 20-year period, why isn't LeBron James absolute garbage in today's NBA? Even looking at someone like Kobe, who played in the 90s, the 2000s, even the 2010s, and the late 2010s, in all those eras, he added something and was a great player in each of those time periods. Once again proving superstars over a 20-year period can evolve in a moment, and it isn't black and white saying one era stinks and the other era is drastically better. And one last thing I will say regarding Jordan, he retired in 2003 and finally hung it up. And only 6 months later, LeBron James would come into the NBA as an 18-year-old. Michael Jordan and LeBron James were separated by less than 6 months. Think about that 1 second. These guys, the two greatest players of all time, were separated by less than a year. Now, that right there is our last video clip, but I will say one last thing. Looking at Draymond Green, his overall points, they're very, very weak and easily debunked. And in most of his arguments, he uses very vague terms like skill, talent, evolution, and doesn't really go in detail and define these things. And per usual, when talking about NBA players, they have no stats, no numbers, no tangible data to prove one player was better than the other. So, as always, thank you guys for watching, hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you guys next time.